أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
الحمد لله رب العالمين، صلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وعلى من سار على سبيله ونهجه واهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا خالصا لوجهك صوابا لسنة نبيك عليه الصلاة والسلام. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. وبشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. Imam al-Tirmidhi rahimahullah ta'ala, he quotes a very interesting incident which took place after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, in which the great Khalifa, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Uthman ibn Affan, radiyallahu ta'ala an, when he would go next to a grave or stand before a grave, he would cry so much that his beard would become drenched with his tears. So some of the Muslims, they asked him, they said that when paradise and hellfire is mentioned in your presence, we don't see you reacting in this way. So he said that I recall the Prophet ﷺ telling us that the grave is the first stage in the akhirah. If a person survives this stage, everything that comes after it only gets better. But if a person doesn't survive this stage, then everything that comes after it only gets worse. And he said that, and I've seen many horrible things, but nothing, generally speaking, comes close to the grave. Nothing comes so close to the grave. So Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who used to have a very thick beard, and it was drenched with tears, this is how he used to react with the grave. And when we look at the companions, the rest of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, we find their behavior, it was very similar to Uthman radiallahu ta'ala. This is why Asma, the sister of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha and the daughter of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, she mentioned a narration which is found in Sahih al-Bukhari and also in the Sunan of al-Nasa'i with an authentic chain, that the Prophet ﷺ made a statement. And then all of a sudden there was an uproar of people breaking down in the gathering. So she asked the person who was there, said that, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, what were the final statements that the Prophet ﷺ made before this uproar, before all of these people breaking down? So he said that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّهُ قَدْ أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ, it has been revealed to me, أَنَّكُمْ تُفْتَنُونَ فِي قُبُورِكُمْ, that you all should be put to trial, will be tested in their graves, similar or very close to the fitna of the Masih al-Dajjal. The fitna of the Masih al-Dajjal. So this is the reason why the Sahaba, they all broke down. And when we look at those who learn from the Sahaba, the next generation, we find again their reaction very similar. In terms of graves, when people die, going to graveyards, attending funeral processions. So we find, for example, Debit al-Bunani rahimahullah ta'ala, from the first few generations, when he describes those people who would, when they would go to a janazah, said that we would only find people fall into one of two categories. Either they would be covering their faces, mutaqanni'an bakiya, that they would be covering their faces in tears. Or you'd find another person who would be mutaqanni'an mutafakkira, a person covering his face in deep contemplation. And Al-A'mash rahimahullah ta'ala, also from the first few generations, he describes them. He said that we would attend the funeral procession and we wouldn't know who to give condolences to. We wouldn't know who to give condolences to. Why? Because everyone's grieving, everyone's sad, everyone's upset. And those who came slightly after them the same, Yahya bin Abi Kathir rahimahullah ta'ala, when he would attend the janazah during the day, لم يتعشى تلك الليلة. He wouldn't be able to eat dinner that same night. He wouldn't be able to eat dinner that same night. And some of them, when it was just mentioned to them, they used to have difficulty speaking. Like even some of them were great scholars, so people would go and ask them questions, but they were in too much contemplation and thought. They were overwhelmed with what they're thinking about and what was just mentioned, let alone actually attending, that they couldn't really answer. They couldn't answer. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, after burying a companion of his, he would tell his companions, what would he say? He would say, "Istaghfiru li akhikum." Seek forgiveness for your brother. ثُمَّ سَلُوا لَهُ التَّثْبِيتِ. Then ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep him firm. فَإِنَّهُ الْآنَ يُسْأَلْ. For now he is going to be questioned. So, why did these people, meaning the Sahaba and those who came after them, why did they take this so seriously? And why would they react in this manner? The previous weeks, and specifically last week, the lecturer before me mentioned the departure of the soul. How it leaves, the good soul, the bad soul, the white angels that would come if it's a good soul, and the black angels with black faces if it was a bad soul, and then they would ascend towards heavens. If it's a good soul, they would be allowed to enter into heaven. If it's a bad soul, it wouldn't even be allowed to enter into heaven. Whatever the case, after that, the souls, they return back and they're restored back into the bodies. So as for the bad soul, now we're continuing. As for the bad soul, what happens is that once he enters in, then two angels come who are blind. Or there's a few angels that come, there's an angel that comes after them who's blind. But let's go into this part first. So two angels, they come and they're very stern. And they get him to sit up and then they start to ask questions. So from the questions that they ask, they say that, and it's all to do with a person's faith. So they ask him that, who is your Lord? And if it was a bad soul, specifically a non-believer, then they would not be able to answer correctly. Some of them will say, la adri. I don't know. They'll be asked after that, what religion did you follow? And he'll say, I don't know. And then he'll be asked, who was that man that was sent to you? And he would reply in the same manner. I don't know. So then, and in some of the narrations, it mentions that a man will come with a club and starts to ask him questions abruptly. So some of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ said that if a person is coming with a club, surely a person is going to become confused. Even if they knew the answer, they would have difficulty in making sure that they actually say the right answer. It says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep those who believed and who worked righteousness firm to answer the questions correctly during that time, during this difficult time. So whatever the case, after they answer the questions incorrectly, then a voice will come from the heaven saying that my slave has lied. And these angels, they'll say to him that upon doubt you lived, upon doubt you died upon, and upon doubt you shall be raised and resurrected once again, insha'Allah. Then after that, a number of things happen. From the things that happen is that same voice says that my slave has lied. So bed him from the hellfire. Open a gate, a door from the doors of a hellfire. And then heat will start to enter into the grave. After heat starts to enter into the grave, then what will happen is that the grave will start to cave in, corner in on the individual, until his ribs, they break. And in some of the narrations, it mentions a man then comes who has a very ugly face. قَبِيحُ الْوَجْهِ قَبِيحُ الثِّيَابِ مُنْتِنُ الرِّيحِ. Who has a very ugly face, the worst type of clothing, and a very disgusting, distasteful smell, unpleasant smell that emanates from this individual. And then he will say to him that now you're going to be given news that displeases you. This is the day that you were promised. So he'll say that, who are you? For your face seems to be a face that only brings with it bad news. And just like I'm going to be given bad news, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give the same to you. So he'll say that I am your bad deeds. I am your bad deeds. Then a person will start to say that, oh my Lord, do not establish the hour. Oh my Lord, do not establish the hour. And then in some of the narrations they mention that they'll be made to see paradise. And they'll say, if you obeyed Allah, this would have been your dwelling. This would have been the place that you would reside in. But you didn't. So then another place will be shown and he'll say, this is your place. And the hellfire. So a person, he'll look at it and he'll see the hellfire and say, this will be your place. And then what will happen, from the things that will happen, is that a man comes who is blind, who is deaf, and who is dumb, and who has a sledgehammer in his hand. The Prophet ﷺ says, if he was to strike a mountain with it, he would turn the mountain into dust. And then he strikes the individual and he turns into dust. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala restores him back to how he was before, and then he strikes him again. And this time the Prophet ﷺ says, and he'll scream so loud that every living creature will be able to hear him except for mankind and the jinn. Except for mankind. And this is why in Sahih al-Bukhari and also in Sahih Muslim, you find that the Prophet ﷺ tells us that if it wasn't that you would stop burying one another, I would call unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that you may hear some of the punishment and the problems in the grave. But this is what would happen, that people would stop, they'll be very scared from burying one another. And then a number of things happen as well. A number of things happen in terms of how they're punished during this time, based on what they used to do. Based on what they used to do. Even a number of the believers will be punished during this time. Even if and we know that the believers, generally speaking, their destiny is paradise. Their destiny is paradise. But if they used to do a particular sin, then there's a big chance that what will happen is they're going to be punished with that sin. So we'll give some of the examples right now of some of those that the Prophet ﷺ told us in the hadith of Samurah, of those from the believers who are punished in the grave. Who are punished in the grave. So from them is a man, the Prophet ﷺ said, he went past a man. There were two men. There was one man who was lying on his back, and then there was another man who had a big rock in his hand, and he struck it on his head, and what happened is it cut the individual's head into two. And then the rock, it rolled, and as that man, the one who struck him in the first place, as he went to go get the rock, then the individual's head had restored again, and then he done the same thing again. And then he's done the same thing again. And when the Prophet ﷺ later on, when he was told about this man, he said, this is a man who learns the Quran, forgets it at night and doesn't implement it during the day, and sleeps through the obligatory prayers. Sleeps through the obligatory prayers. And then the Prophet ﷺ mentioned another case in which there were two men. One of them had an iron hook in his hand, and the other one was there on the floor, on the ground. And what he done is he placed the iron hook on his mouth, on the edge of his mouth, and tore it to the back. Then after that, from his nostril, and then tore it all the way to the back. Then his eye, then tore it all the way to the back. Then he started with the other side of the face. And he done it from the face to the nose and then to the eyes. After he finished the other side, the first side was restored again. So he started again. I said, this individual is going to remain like this. It's going to keep happening again and again and again. And then there was there were a number of individuals in which the Prophet ﷺ went past something which looked like, it was like an oven. This was like an oven. And it was very narrow from the top, but very wide inside. So when he peeked inside, when he looked inside, he found that there were a number of naked men and women. And underneath them, there was a fire which would just flare up and it would take them, it would rocket them up until they nearly flew out. And they'll be screaming. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he described these individuals, what did he say about them? He said, when he was told about them, he said that these are the male and female people who do zina, who fornicate or commit adultery. And then he came across another two men. One man, there was like a big pool, and there was a man at the bank. The individual who was in the middle, there was one man who was swimming, and there was one man on the shore, like on the bank. So the individual who was swimming, what he would do is he would come towards the man in the bank trying to escape from the pool. Every time he tries to escape, then that man, he tosses a stone inside it, and that prevents him from going, and then he goes back to the middle again. And then he comes and he tries again, and the individual he tosses a stone in his mouth again. And that carries on happening again and again and again. When he was told about them, he said that this individual was one who would eat interest. Yeah? Interest. Money from interest. And then there was others as well that he came across. From them, there were those who he saw that it's like their tongues there were scissors made of fire placed, taken onto their lips. When he was asked who were these individuals, he said these are the orators, the khutaba, those who give sermons from your ummah, those who give sermons, who remind the people but forget themselves. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those people who, when we remind others to do khair, we're the first individuals who try to implement the khair. Otherwise, we have a big problem in the next life. Otherwise, we have a very big problem in the next life. And then he came across others as well. From them, there was that lady, according to scholars, who he saw during the eclipse prayer. He said that he saw the sahibatul hirra, the lady who retained, she stopped a cat, basically like imprisoned the cat, and didn't allow the cat from eating, didn't feed the cat, didn't allow the cat to eat the vermins and the insects or whatever there is on the earth until it died. So she was punished for that. And others from those who were punished, as well, who the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about, are those who do ghiba. Those who do ghiba. Those who backbite. And also those who spread rumors. And they like to create enmity and friction amongst the Muslims. Those who like to create enmity. They'll tell this person, this person said so. They'll come to Muhammad and they'll say, maybe it's a relative, maybe a friend or some other person. This guy speaks ill of you. And he's come to this person, say, this guy speaks ill of you, to create enmity and grudges between people. This is a type of namima. And also from them that he mentioned are those who are not careful when they use the bathroom. They're not careful. So when they use the bathroom, they just get out, and maybe if urine's all over them, they're not really fussed. They don't really classify this to be something very important. They're not really concerned about how clean they are. So all of these individuals, they will be punished in the grave. They'll be punished in the grave. And there's plenty of other ones as well. And these are not just for the disbelievers, my dear respected brothers and sisters. This is from the disbelievers, and their punishment, generally speaking, is ongoing until Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then a number of the believers too, their punishment will carry on and continue until Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then we'll find some of the believers who will be punished for a short period of time based on their sin. Maybe they didn't do too many sins. Be punished for some period of time, and then they'll be okay after that. But generally speaking, this is an insight into the bad individual. The individual who is going to be punished in the next life. And I don't want to overlap into next week, but generally speaking, I would strongly advise the brothers and sisters that to the stuff that we've mentioned, we've given you an insight into a number of punishments into the grave. Yeah, people who will be punished in the grave. One of them that we mentioned, the individual that we mentioned concerning the hook, as far as I recall, I didn't actually mention what he was doing or what he done. What he done, the Prophet ﷺ, when he was told, he said that this individual will leave his house and then spread a lie that will spread all over the globe. Yeah, all over, everywhere. So this is his punishment, that individual place an iron hook on his mouth, take it all the way to the back, then his nose, then his eye, and then the next side of his face. Every time one side is done, the other side, he starts to work on. So we strongly advise all of us, and this is a reminder for myself first and foremost, and then my dear respected brothers and sisters, that go and pay attention to all of the reasons why a person can be punished in the grave. And then if you find that you fall into any of those categories, then ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you for starters, yeah, and make sincere tawbah, and try your best to place a barrier between you and that sin. And the same applies for Yawm al-Qiyamah. Because is it Yawm al-Qiyamah next week? Yeah? On Yawm al-Qiyamah, the same applies. There's going to be plenty of things where an individual is going to be in big trouble on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So again, the stuff that the next lecturer mentions next week, inshaAllah ta'ala, and then in your own time, if you can go and ask or even research or whatever you do, so you actually put it together and you're aware of, I need to stay away from all of these things. And more than that, but these are just an example. This is just an example of how to do it. So at least a person tries their best in the next life, inshallah. Yeah, tries to secure themselves in the next life. And inshallah, if you do that, then let's look at when things run smoothly. So when things run smoothly, after an individual, he departs from his body, and that's a nice smooth time, because it comes out very smoothly. Then after that, he ascends towards the heavens, and again, a noble path all the way to the heavens. He doesn't go through any group of angels except the angels are delighted, and they say, who is so-and-so? Who is such and such a good soul? And they say, so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, of the best of names, that he was addressed in this world. Then they'll ask for admission in the heavens, and they'll be granted it. Then they'll go from one heaven to the other heaven, and they'll be escorted by the most noble of scribes. And then some of the believers, they'll stop them, and they would want to ask questions. Then others will intervene and say, hold on, wait a minute. This individual, he's just come out of the grief of the dunya, so let him rest for a little while. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. I'm paraphrasing right now. Yeah, but I'm sticking to the meaning. So after that, when they find that he's had enough time, then they start to ask questions. How's so-and-so? How's so-and-so male? How's so-and-so female? Has she got married? What's happened to her? After that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions to record the records of his slave in the Illiyin, then return him back to the earth. For from the earth I created him, and to it I shall return him, and from it I shall bring him back forth once again. Then the individual's soul returns back into his body. The Prophet ﷺ then says that then he starts to hear the footsteps of those people who have just buried him. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ tells us that the mayyit, the deceased person, when they're taking him to the grave, then what happens? 3 things follow him: his family, his wealth, and his actions. فَيَرْجِعُ اثْنَانِ وَيَبْقَى وَاحِدٌ. 2 of them return. And in some of the narrations, it mentions it more in brief concerning the 2 that return. As for wealth, it says, benefit, take as much of me as possible whilst you're in this world. As for your family, then the family says, we will be the ones who descend in the grave to place you in the grave. These two, they return. They'll put you in the grave, but after that, ma'a salama. They're gone. And the only one that remains is your deeds, regardless if they're good or they're bad. Regardless if they're good or they're bad. So the individual, he starts to hear the footsteps, they're walking past, the thumping footsteps of the people who've just buried him, walking. After that, the good soul is made to believe that it's sunset. So he gets up, and then he tells, then the two angels, they come, and he says, Da'uni usalli. He says, leave me, let me perform the prayer. And he says, and they'll say to him, you will. However, right now, answer what we have to ask. The good soul, now pay attention to these points. At his head, on his head, according to a number of authentic narrations, there'll be salah and his Quran. This is ghaybiyat, generally speaking. This is the unseen, and this type of stuff can only be mentioned either by Allah in the Quran or from wahi, which the Prophet ﷺ has narrated to us. So as the Prophet ﷺ mentions, so he says that, so the Quran will be placed on his head, meaning will be at his head, Quran and salah. On his right will be fasting, on his left will be zakah, and by his feet there'll be salah, sadaqah, charity, walking to the masjid, when he used to help people, when he used to do good to people. All of that will be around him. So it's like he's going to be guarded, shielded with good deeds. So what happens? The angels try to enter through the head. And the salah and the Quran will say, Ma qibali madkhal. There's no entrance from my path. You can't come through this. There's no entrance here. They come from the right. They say there's no entrance. Siyam will say there's no entrance from this side. Then the left, and then we said there's no entrance from this. Then from the feet, we said there's no entrance. After that, the individual, after he's got up, he has no fear whatsoever. Then they start to ask him questions. And they ask him, who's your Lord? And he answers comfortably that my Lord is Allah. He says, Rabbi Allah. My Lord is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says that, what religion do you used to follow? He says that my religion is al-Islam. And he says, who was that man that was sent to you? He says, and the individual will say, he is the messenger of Allah. So they say, how do you know that? So he will say that I read the book of Allah and I believed in it. I believed in it. So then it will be said to the individual that upon yaqeen, ala al-yaqeen, upon conviction and certainty, surely did you live? And upon it did you die? And surely upon certainty will you be raised, insha'Allah. And then a voice will be mentioned from the heavens. An sadaqa abdi, my slave has told the truth. So bed him from the beddings of paradise. Clothe him from the clothing of paradise, and open a gate from the gates of paradise. Automatically, after that, the grave will start to expand greatly. In some of the narrations, they only mention 70 cubits. Other narrations mentions as far as the eye can see. As far as the eye can see. And then after that, a beautiful fragrance will start to enter into the individual's grave. A beautiful fragrance will start to enter into the individual's grave. Then after that, it will be illuminated. The grave will be illuminated. And then they'll see the hellfire. The hellfire will be made onto one side. So they'll say, this would have been your place if you disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, but he says, but no. And then he'll show the other side and he'll say that this is your place, meaning a place in paradise. Why? Because you obeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the individual, he's only going to start to increase. He's going to start to increase in happiness. He's really, really happy. And then after that, a man will come. حسن الوجه حسن الثياب, with a handsome face, the most finest type of clothing, طيب الريح, and the most pleasant, the most beautiful type of fragrance. So he will say to him, أبشر بالذي يسرك. This man, this handsome man will say to the deceased, you say that, glad tidings to that which pleases you. This is the day that you were promised. So that individual, he's going to be really happy. And he's going to say, you know that, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you too. And give you the best. Who are you? For you seem to be a person, your face seems to be a face that's going to bring good news and glad tidings. So you say to him, أنا عملك الصالح. I am your righteous deeds. I am your righteous deeds. And after this, when the individual, he sees that things are just going from good to that which gets better, from that which gets better to that which is much better than that, and it's only, things are only increasing in khair, in good. So then the individual rejoices and he gets so happy that he says that, now let me go back to my family so that I can inform them of this good news. Let me go back to my family so that I can inform them of this good news. And then after that, they'll say to him, no, go to sleep now. Nam, go to sleep. Nam kanawmat al-arus. Go to sleep like the one who is newlywed, who's just got married. Who's only woken up by the one who is most beloved to them. And then the individual, he'll start to say, oh my Lord, establish that. Make the hour come quickly. Oh my Lord, speed up the time for the hour so that I may return back to my family and my property. And then generally speaking, in terms of the reward and the punishment, then according to a number of scholars, they mention that the body as well as the soul enters into the body, and the body, tastes some of the sweetness, and some of the time it's just the soul tasting the sweetness. So for example, because we find that in Jannah, a number of souls that are placed in paradise, from them there's the righteous good believer. And the righteous good believer, the Prophet ﷺ describes in an authentic narration that he'll be made like a bird, taking and tasting from the fruits of paradise. From the fruits of paradise. And then as for the martyrs, placed in green birds, into green birds. And then we have a number of other people as well. From them, the Anbiya, the prophets. And the Anbiya, generally speaking, they don't have none of this. They don't have any of this. The same applies to a number of other people, meaning the people who don't have no trial whatsoever, like the Anbiya, meaning the Anbiya, the prophets, the martyrs, a number of other people who had certain diseases, like the one who had an abdominal disease. Yeah, there's a number of people who don't have no trial whatsoever. This is specifically mentioned concerning them. Then as for the young child who dies before maturity, generally speaking, then the scholars have agreed that this individual, he's going paradise. This individual is going paradise. It's only the non-believing one that there is a disagreement concerning. Yeah, that there is a disagreement concerning. That some of them will eventually go to paradise and others will not. Like according to a number of scholars, they'll be put to trial on Yawm al-Qiyamah. They'll be put to trial on Yawm al-Qiyamah. As for the people who are not going to pass in that trial on Yawm al-Qiyamah, Ibn Kathir rahimahullah mentions that Allah would decree what will happen to these individuals during the barzakh period. During the barzakh period. So whatever the case, concluding what we've mentioned, we'll say that looking at the good soul and the bad soul, my dear respected brothers and sisters, it's important that when we listen to this, when we read about this type of stuff, that the whole reason why we're listening to this type of stuff or we're reading this type of stuff is so we draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, so if we were doing some sin, we stop doing that sin. And if we are difficult with the Fajr prayer or something similar to that, then now we're performing it on time, inshallah. Yeah, because we don't want no problems in the next life. That's one thing. Secondly, originally, we were not allowed to go to visit the graves. We were not allowed to visit the graveyard, generally speaking. And this is mentioned in the hadith of Buraidah, in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet ﷺ says that I used to prohibit you from visiting the graves, but now visit them. But now visit them. Why? Because they remind you of the akhirah. For they remind an individual of the akhirah. So, when we do this, meaning when we visit the graves, and we're aware of all of this type of stuff, what do? We're supposed to draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's one thing. Another point is that next time there's a funeral, and we've mentioned some of how the people of the past used to react, at least try, maybe before you are unaware. Because most of us, when we go to the graveyard, some people are smoking, some people, it's just like some, gathering spot that we haven't met people for a few years or a long time no see, and something similar to that. It's like some place where we just gather once in a while, like a Eid day or something similar to that. It's important that next time you go to a graveyard or next time you're aware of someone's death, that you're actually affected. Because today is this individual and tomorrow will be yourself. Today is this individual and tomorrow will be one of us. So make sure that you take heed from this, because one day someone's going to take heed from our death, and there's no doubt concerning that. Yes? There's going to come a day that someone's going to take heed from our death. And this is why that you find a number of the people of the past, as Ibn Rajab rahimahullah mentions, that when they found that their hearts used to go becoming hard, then what would they do? They would go to visit the graveyard. So why? Because, and some of them, like some of the Ibn Rajab mentions a couple of stories as well, and a couple of incidents. But you find some of them, when they go there, some of them would really weep for quite some time. I mean, thinking to themselves, and they go to different places, not like they'll go to their family member or something. They go to different places, and the only reason is just to remember them of the akhirah, so that they soften their heart and they draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For when we look at the Sahaba, we found that their hearts, generally speaking, very soft. Like the example that I just gave at the beginning, the incident of Asma, that he just made that statement. How many of us do we find our hearts similar to this? Like he's saying that Asma, all he said was that it's been revealed to me that you lot will be tested in your grave the same or similar to the what? The Dajjal, the trial of a Dajjal. And all of them broke down. What does that show though? It shows that they have a very soft heart. They used to have soft hearts. If you can break down that easily, without a doubt, it's a strong imani wave. But if you're able to break down that easily, what does that mean? That means that you have a very soft heart. Like in another narration, also in Sahih al-Bukhari, another incident. This isn't no one-off incident because the Prophet ﷺ said that. Another narration, the Prophet ﷺ said to the companions, and the companion who narrates the narration, he said the Prophet ﷺ خطب خطبة. He delivered a khutbah. He said, ما سمعت مثلها قط. I never heard the likes of it before. What did he say? لو تعلمون ما أعلم. Listen to this one statement. لو تعلمون ما أعلم لضحكتم قليلا ولبكيتم كثيرا. He said that if you knew what I know, you would laugh a little and cry profusely. So the companion, he narrates that how did the companions react to this statement? فغطى أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. They covered the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they covered their faces, لهم خنين, and they broke down. They were in tears. And that shows very soft hearts. This is how the Sahaba were. Just like we want to follow them in everything, it's important that we learn exactly how they were concerning everything. Yeah, concerning everything. So finally, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept everything that was said and everything that was heard, and to make it an argument for us and not against us, and to add it to our scale of good deeds, And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all the ability to act upon everything that was said, and to grant us the best of departures from this life, and to be from those people who we're only going to be enjoying ourselves in the next life, moving from one stage to a stage far greater than it. Insha'Allah ta'ala. Barakallahu feekum. Wa jazakum Allahu khair.
Inshallah, we'll take a couple of questions on the topic. So if anyone has any questions related to the topic, inshallah, we'll take a couple of questions.
He's asking, what about the people who are cremated? Hatta there's a narration concerning that. Yeah, where a person done that. Just because they're cremated, it doesn't mean that they can't be put together. Yeah, and an example was that found in the Sahih, where an individual told him, and he said that, he told his children, etc., to do that to him and then to place him in different places. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put him back to him and asked him why he done that. So the point is anyway, is that just because a person, however a person dies, generally speaking, they can't escape from any of this type of stuff. Yeah, they can't escape from any of this type of stuff. Wallahu alam. Jazakallahu khair. Prophets before? Yes. Meaning you're talking about before Islam? Yes. Concerning the question is what about the people who are before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Yeah? Are they going to be put to trials? There's a dispute amongst the scholars concerning the people before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time that are going to be put to trial or not. But generally speaking, this seems to be the view of the majority anyway. Yeah, that they will be put to trial. Yeah, in a different way. Meaning, not necessarily that they're going to be asked about the Prophet ﷺ. Wallahu alam exactly the details of how they're going to be questioned, but they will be put to trial according to the majority of the scholars.
We'll take the last question, inshallah.
Is this the final question, yeah? That's the third. So khalas, we'll close it up with that, inshallah. So the brother's asking concerning, we mentioned that if a person is a good person in this life and they do good deeds, then there'll be a man with a handsome face, with the finest type of clothing, طيب الريح, with the most pleasant type of smells emanating from the individual. So are there any type of good deeds that will help an individual? Yeah, and help their good deeds, etc. during that time. صح? Is that? There's a short answer and a long answer. There's a short answer and a long answer. If we want to give a long answer, we can go on for quite some time to be. We can give another lecture, to be honest with you. Yeah? In fact, it might even be a bit longer than that. But in brief, we'll try and make it as quick as possible, inshallah. As we know, that the days that we're currently, these days of Dhul Hijjah, yeah, these is like the best days in the year, according to a number of scholars. The best 10 days in the year. So much so that Ibn Rajab rahimahullah mentions that, and حتى Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, and a number of them, they say that they're even better than the last 10 days in Ramadan. They're even better than the last, and this is mentioned in the hadith of Ibn Abbas in Sahih al-Bukhari. So the question that that was posed and that was asked is actually a very nice question, suitable for the time that we're in at the moment. Because on Monday it will be the day of Arafah, and on Tuesday will be Eid, right? Inshallah. So there's plenty of good deeds, ya ikhwan. My dear respected brothers and sisters, plenty of good deeds. And the thing is that a lot of us, we forget about basic deeds. Wallah, basic deeds. And even the smallest of deeds will allow you to hit the highest ranks in the next life. Yeah? Will help you, obviously, if you do a lot of them. So for example, we'll give you a number of examples. Small deeds, let's give small deeds, because they're more practical to implement. For example, the Prophet ﷺ tells us in Sahih al-Bukhari, he said to the companions, which one of you can recite a third of the Quran in one night? It seemed like a difficult thing to the Sahaba. So he said, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدْ تَعْدِلُ ثُلُثَ الْقُرْآنِ. Saying, reciting قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدْ is equivalent to reciting, is equivalent, meaning the person is going to get a reward of a third of the Quran. This is in Bukhari and Muslim. Another example, the Prophet ﷺ said, he said, رَأَيْتُ رَجُلًا, I saw a man, this is in Sahih Muslim, I saw a man enjoying himself in paradise. Over what? Listen to the action that he done. Because he saw something harmful on the pathway and he removed it. That's it. That's all he done, ya akhi. Look at that. That's all he done. And in another narration, just before in Sahih Muslim, in fact, this is found in quite a few places in Sahih Muslim, that same individual, meaning who just removed something from the harm, from the pathway, something harmful on the road, on the footpath, or something similar to that, he said, because he done this action, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he appreciated the action. So what did he do? He forgave his sins. He forgave him for his sins. Small thing like that. Another example, this is small actions. Another example in Sahih al-Bukhari, a man was walking, then he saw a dog, very thirsty. A dog, this is not even a human being, a dog. Very thirsty. So what did he do? He took off his leather sock, placed it in a bi'r, in a well, took it out, whatever water came out, whatever water he could take out, scoop out from the well, and then gave it to the dog. And again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appreciated this action, so he forgave him. Look at that. Small actions like this. Small actions like this. Another example is the Prophet ﷺ tells us in Bukhari and Muslim, and authority of Abu Hurairah and others, that he says, الساعي على الأرملة, that the one who sponsors, who tries their best to sponsor widows, والمسكين, and the poor person, كالمجاهد في سبيل الله, is like the one who is a mujahid in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And not only that, but also performs a prayer at night and fast during the day. All for what? Supporting a poor person and a widow. Small actions like that. Really, really small actions. Another example is, and we hope, wallah, as a side point before I mention this, I hope, insha'Allah ta'ala, that I'm from them, insha'Allah. Wallahu alam if I am, but we hope that is the case. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned the narration in Sahih Muslim and authority of Abu Hurairah, said that a man left his town, entered into another town. Yeah, because I came from London, that's the reason I mentioned that. So he left his town and he went into another town. And then, what happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down an angel to ask this man. He said, what are you doing here? What brings you to this town? He said that, nothing. I've come to meet a brother of mine for the sake of Allah. So he said that, he hasn't done something good for you, so you've come to repay it back, to compensate him. He said, no, it's just that I love him for the sake of Allah. So he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you because of your love for this individual. Small, like we said, these are very, very, very small actions. There's plenty of them as a side point. There's plenty of actions, like this. So it's important that a person tries from now, specifically on Monday anyway, since it's only 2 days away and there's not going to be no reminder until then. Yeah, the next one's next week. So Monday, make sure that all of the brothers and sisters, me speaking right now, make sure that you fast on Monday. And in fact, I would advise you that you push your fellow friends, your neighbors, your cousins, your relatives, whoever, you know, to fast on that day, so you actually get the reward. You get the reward for them fasting as well, inshallah. Specifically if they didn't know. Yes, specifically if they didn't know. So make sure you fast. And along with that, do any type of good deed during this time. Anything small. Even if it's you bought some, you know, some groceries or something like that, and then you had some extras, or even if you didn't have extras, when you're cooking food, for example, you give something to the neighbor, hosting someone, visiting an ill person, giving some charity, as we know that there's plenty of problems in the world. Yeah, so there's plenty of avenues to give in charity. Even those people, even if you're aware of some people who are living in difficulty in your own town, help them. Yeah, or your relatives or anything. Whatever you can, the point is that try your best to make the most of these 10 days. And generally speaking, if a person does these small actions, and I would advise people to try and learn about these small actions, because there's plenty of them. There's plenty of them, inshaAllah ta'ala. Then you can benefit the most in the next life. But more than anything else, I'll finish it off with this statement. More than anything else, it's important, my dear respected brothers and sisters, that you take care of the obligatory actions. You take care of the two things. You take care of the obligatory actions. So it's not that a person's doing all of these nawafil, and as for prayers, where's the prayer? And the 5 daily prayer is not even performed on time. Yeah, it's not even performed on time. And the rest of the stuff as well. And the second point is that try your best to learn about the major sins. All of them, one by one. And then to stay away from them. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, إِن تَجْتَنِبُوا كَبَائِرَ مَا تُنْهَوْنَ عَنْ نُكَفِّرْ عَنْكُمْ سَيِّئَاتِكُمْ وَنُدْخِلْكُمْ مُدْخَلًا كَرِيمًا. That if you stay away from the major sins that we have prohibited you to perform, then what will happen? We shall expiate your minor sins, and we shall enter you into paradise with a noble entry. جزاكم الله خيرا وبارك الله فيكم. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect you all and to preserve you all, as well as your families, and to bless you all and your families, and to grant you all the best of departures from this life, and to reward you all for bearing patience with us. جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.